For those of us who've been investing in Tesla for quite some time, there's a lot of excitement, but what if there was a company that's even more exciting, so exclusive you can't even invest in it? Something like a little space company called SpaceX. Yes, Tesla did the impossible by making EVs at a time when new car companies were just not a thing, and SpaceX, the fledgling startup, went from nothing to being the biggest launch provider in the world, and quickly at that. That's what we're going to be discussing, is that all the possibilities around the impossibility of investing in SpaceX. I got Randy Kirk here from his channel. I'm sure by now you know who he is, and if not, check the link in the description. I'm Brian. Welcome to Future Oza.
Hello, Brian.
Randy, how are you? How are you? How are you?
Oh, just spacey.
Oh, well, check with your doctor. So, Reuters is of the opinion SpaceX will be a better trillion-dollar bet than Tesla. Interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
And there are a couple reasons for their theory. Let's see here, rocket maker SpaceX internal 350 billion valuation makes it among the globe's most valuable private startups. Still a fraction of the worth of Elon Musk. Yes, a fraction, a large fraction. Like two-fifths or something. Maybe, I mean,
Yes,
he
it's
owns.
almost half. It's almost as much as his Tesla investment, but it's because he owns 45 or 50% of it, as opposed to only 12%.
Right.
Yes.
So some bad math to start out. But we know what SpaceX does and we know what it's worth. And it's an easier company to understand because it's really just two things today. It is internet and launch. Would you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, they have a few contracts that are about their future ability to go point to point. But I think they have a $500 million U.S. contract for point to point. But but for the most part, yeah, I 100% agree.
The point to point is on the horizon. And I don't know how big that will be compared to any of the other things that they're already doing, but it doesn't really matter because we can't invest in it anyway. It is not a publicly traded company, but it's a very exciting company. For those who aren't aware, I am going down to Starbase this very week to see test launch 7, test catch 2. Very exciting stuff. I'll be in the harbor as close as one can get. 7 miles, that's plenty close enough for me. And excitement guaranteed. Look at this chart here. Objects launched into space. And I don't think this is a SpaceX chart. This is a global chart. Something happened right around 2012 here. I wonder what it could have been. And around 2017, this number gets larger. So that's pretty exciting. SpaceX accounted for over 85% of all orbital payloads in the first quarter of 2024. Wow. 85%, meaning SpaceX, of course, delivers more payload to orbit than all other companies and countries combined.
By a lot.
By a lot. So, Randy, what are the keys to being the largest launch provider? So I want to be the largest launch provider. I'm SpaceX. What do I need to do to make that happen?
What did they need to do to make that happen, or
Yeah.
well, they needed to come up with something that was reusable. That was the key.
Mm-hmm.
And the Falcon 9 was the big change that took place. They now, I believe, have launched over 90% of all the tonnage that's in space today. I think by the end of this year, they might be up to close to 99% of all the tonnage that's in space. And I think maybe by the end of the next year, it might be 99.9% because
Mm.
they're going to start launching that Starship 7 and put payloads on it. And once they start putting payloads on that baby, it can handle 100 tons at a time.
So I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I feel like it's kind of irrelevant. The numbers are so big it doesn't make sense. And you're right. The key has been we just need to make it cheap, and readily available. It has to be the best deal on the market with the most reliability, and we have to actually be able to have it available. Being cheap isn't enough if the supply is constrained. So, reusability, that one word does it all. That means you've got the rockets to use. You don't have to build new ones every single time. It means the cost is going to be lower. And because it is built for reuse, you can spend more money on it. I've seen people say, you know what, SpaceX should start selling their rocket engines to other companies. And I said, I'm not sure it's cost effective to do so if you're going to chuck it in the ocean every time. And for that matter, I don't know if SpaceX would even want to sell them to you if they're going to be doing that.
Well,
So, yes.
there's another aspect, and one that's very, very important, and that is that Elon has actually put his SpaceX into the business of mass producing everything. So they mass
Yes.
produce the engines, they mass produce the rockets. They are now mass producing the spaceship, the Starship, and the booster. They're going to mass produce the because they're going to need them all over the world for this point to point thing. So when you're looking at other space companies, they make them one at a time, bespoke, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
With Elon,
Yes.
no, they mass produce them.
There are economies of scale that work differently. If I wanted to make 30 of something, a small batch of something, and I said, Randy, I need you to consult, should I put in an assembly line? No, that's the wrong tool for the job. That'll cost you $1 million to set it up. It'll save you 90% on your cost, but you'll never get it back on 30. So since we're just having some fun, why don't we show off some differences between this week's launch Starship Flight 7 and the previous ones. So Starship version 2, slightly bigger than version 1. That
Hmm.
means the rocket is now over 400 feet in length. It has more propellant, meaning more thrust, more capacity. This one will actually be deploying some dummy payload. And yeah,
Oh
they're going to be,
no, no. Anybody we know?
yeah, Gordon Johnson will be deployed.
Oh, I see.
Sorry, Gojo. Hey, it's not my fault. I've been inviting you on the show for 4 years and you don't respond. So come on the show, for Christ's saying out loud. So we've got
Yeah.
active cooling, heat tiles to be tested, Raptor engine, and there's one reflown engine on this that was flown in Test 5, and they're going to try and catch it.
Now
That's
those
fun.
now those heat tiles are the critical part. I think based on the articles that I've been reading and a little conversation with Brian Wong, the rest of the ship has performed so well. Everything else is working so well, but the heat tiles are still the reusability issue. You've got to be able to send those babies into space, bring them back into the atmosphere at very high temperatures, have it now be caught by Mechazilla, and have it ready to go in an hour. Well, those have got to be some pretty dang good heat tiles. So
Right.
what we're testing this time is, and Elon has said, this is probably one of the most important things on this particular trip.
Exactly. Now, you've heard of an ablative heat shield. This cannot use ablative material. It cannot ablate. If it does, it needs to be replaced. That's the key. When we're talking about the financial advantage that SpaceX has over the rivals, let's look at now. This chart is pretty old, but it's still pretty good. Launch cost of comparing Blue Origin's, launches with Amazon, and Amazon can use anyone. And so there's a few different options listed here. Interestingly, they were prohibited from getting a bid from SpaceX, and their shareholders sued them for that because that was a mistake. You may have just forfeit the entire constellation due to your hubris, Lex. And I assume his name is Lex Luthor because he looks like a cartoon villain. So, what is the cost to launch per satellite? Well, anywhere from 3 to 6 million plus. And we don't know what it would be on Blue Origin. Hopefully, Blue Origin will find economies of scale like Starship or like even Falcon 9. But that remains to be seen. There's a bunch of articles saying, oh, Elon's running for the hills now because here comes Blue Origin. calm down, sunshine. They haven't even gotten to orbit yet. Versus even on a Falcon 9, and this is again a very out of date figure, 260,000 to launch each one. It also is saying that 53 satellites is what is deployed. It's no longer 53, the satellites are bigger. So while costs have fallen, this number has also fallen. It's probably still in the 250,000 per satellite range. If you had told me 20 years ago that companies would be deploying satellites at scale for 250,000 all in, I think I'd have found that very hard to believe.
Yeah, and of course, what happens is when you start having less and less expensive cost to launch, then you have all kinds of reasons to launch that you didn't have before. It's like
It
anything else.
expands the market. It expands the market, and that's why Falcon Heavy hasn't been a huge hit yet. Is once it became evident that you could launch a payload of that size with tremendous weight, now you've got to wait for all the engineering teams to actually come up with something that would fit and have a use to deploy it. So that's been a trick. And since we're just having some fun here, I've got just a couple more. So now that we're doing that, okay, 10 surprising facts. We'll just go through them quick. They've been building it for over 2 decades. Great. Falcon 1 only flew 5 times. Okay, they went straight to Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is the most prolific rocket in history. Yes. Well, commercial rocket. I guess we're excluding like ICBMs.
Okay.
Hopefully those aren't flying too much. Falcon Heavy, not quite the biggest, but still impressive. It is, at least as of the time this article was written, the heaviest launch vehicle in the world. SLS might be heavier already, but if not, it's one of the closest. It's one of the biggest, and certainly at this time was the biggest in operation. Biggest space system of the future. We're talking about Starship and Super Heavy. If you have ever gone to a Starship launch, you have seen the launch of the biggest rocket in history as of the time you were there.
And most powerful.
And most powerful. If you went to launch 6 and you're going to launch 7, you will once again see a launch of the heaviest, most powerful rocket, largest rocket ever built. Build most of it in-house. That's great. The company almost went bankrupt in 2008. Yes, I think we know that. Merlin engine broke efficiency records. These are great. This is a weird one. Dragon was the first commercial spacecraft to dock with the ISS.
Mhm.
What? I think aren't all US? Okay.
No, they're NASA. They're NASA, built by Boeing or built by somebody else, but they were owned by NASA, so they weren't commercial.
Okay. It's a weird distinction. It's a
Yes.
weird distinction. And of course, fact 10, SpaceX aims to make life multiplanetary. I mean, okay, great. But the fun thing I wanted to do is bring up this because I don't know if you know this, but I mentioned it a moment ago. Starship is going to be a little over 400 feet tall. So this is a list of the tallest buildings in every state and territory.
Hmm.
Apparently, the tallest building in Vermont is 124 feet tall. That's interesting. Wyoming, 148 feet tall. Again, over 400 feet, this rocket.
Yeah.
South Dakota at 174 feet. North Dakota, 242 feet tall for the state capitol building. Montana, 272 feet tall. Hampshire at 275. There are a lot of states where if someone said, "Hey, I can't wrap my head around it. How tall is it?" And I'd say, "Oh, the big building downtown? Yeah,
Right.
yeah, the Capitol? Yeah, yeah. Much bigger." Well,
Right.
that doesn't I don't even understand. It's bigger than the state capitol in Charleston by a third. So yeah, we're getting down. Delaware, 360 feet tall. I mean, here we go, closer. The biggest building in Guam. Closer, closer. So yeah, that's how bulky it is. I did want to say a quick thank you to all of my supporters. My referral link is once again in operation. It is the new year. The calendar has rolled over. If you'd like to help me out and you're planning to buy a vehicle, you can use that referral link to get, I believe it's still $1,000 off. and it'll help out the channel. There's other ways to support, uh, but I'm just glad you're here, present
Thank you.
company
Well, thank you.
included.
Oh.
Included.
so, so by the way, I did want to make one additional contribution here, and that
Yeah.
is SpaceX is the largest private company in the world at this point. It has passed all the rest. Now that may not have been true at the time that the article was written. I'm not sure, but it is past Mars and all these. I forget what the other ones were that were close. I've looked that up recently within the week. So it is the largest private company in the world.
Saudi
Um,
Aramco.
Saudi Aramco is not private;
Hmm.
it's a public company. So private companies.
Is it? Oh,
Well,
I didn't know
whether
that.
I'm sorry, whatever the case may be, if Saudi Arabia, I can't remember about Saudi Aramco. What I do know is it is the largest private company. So
I
that
think Saudi Aramco is a sovereign, uh,
no, a
like a,
sovereign
I think it
company,
might be a government company.
a government company could be anyway. And Brian Wang's belief that eventually the SpaceX corporation could be larger than Tesla itself has to do with, of course, the point to point, the ability to eventually take out air transportation, and only people would be going 45 minutes from Los Angeles to Hong Kong or from New York to Paris, and be doing it by spaceship. And if that
Hmm.
happened, along with all the internet business and the cell phone business, it could potentially pass Tesla.
Hmm. Well, that's his jam. He loves to look at the future and through that lens. And I look at a much shorter horizon. I look at, I'm not even counting Mars or the moon at this point, just payload to orbit, just space stations, which is just over the horizon, and of course an expanding satellite providing service, an ISP for the globe. There is tremendous money to be made. United has announced that they are fast tracking installation of Starlink on their flights. To which people who are blinded with hate said, "Who cares? I'd rather have no internet than something that gives Elon any money."
Oh,
You are welcome to do that, my friend. Do not enjoy your flight. But there's already Wi-Fi on flights. It's just slow, inconsistent,
nasty.
laggy, and expensive. Uh, and well, no, it's I've got Delta Sky Miles. It's free, right? It's expensive to Delta. If Delta can save money, they will pass it on to you. I know it feels like they won't, but airlines are a razor thin margin business. They are not out there making the big bucks, despite as cool and fun as the business may seem. What did we miss? What do we misunderstand? Leave it. I insist. Head over to Randy's channel, see what he's up to. He's got a pretty clever guest or two from time to time. And then the rest are just awful. Ah, the worst. I kid, I kid. Everybody else, like, subscribe, do what you do. Stay tuned and juicy. And I cannot wait to hear from you, clever robots, on the flippity flop.